Hello, this video is going to give you some hints on working with the 2D array assignment. If you have not already watched the 2D array videos, please do that first. I am going to focus on how to write a function for a least or finding the least value. These here are just the function stubs. They don't tell you what you should return and what type of data you should input, etc. So let's take a look at this. I have set this program up, not that particular program, but I set a program up on the online GDB compiler. I've been calling it a debugger, but it's a compiler. And so let's just review that, and then we'll go ahead and talk about how to write this or how to write a method to find the lowest. So when we created this program before, we did a multiplication table that was 5 by 5, and we created constants for those values. We used a regular loop to input or to create the multiplication table by taking rows times columns. And if you look at the output down below here, that gave us a multiplication table with rows as zeros. So in order for us to actually get a multiplication table that's a 5 by 5, we do need to, we're putting them in array indices here, row and column, but in order for it to calculate what we would consider a typical multiplication table, we are going to have to add 1 to our values here. Because of that off by 1 error, it's not an error, but just because arrays use 0 indexing, this is what we want to do. We want to multiply the row plus 1 and the column plus 1. Also, when we go to output it though, it's not going to change anything. And remember, when we go to output it, we used a set width here in order to make our output look uniform. So let's run this code just to make sure that everything is in working order, and it is not, because something is not printing correctly. So I need to pause and think about, what are we doing here? I probably need to maybe take and use my order of operations in order to add before I multiply. Otherwise, it's doing PEMDAS incorrectly. And again, I am wrong. So give me a moment to take a look at what's going on here. It was not working correctly because I didn't actually have my output set up correctly. I was not outputting the array. I was outputting just row times column. So that's an error that we need to fix. So we want to output multiplication table, bracket row, bracket column, and it's going to be in a field width of 4. And then remember, the indel is outside the loop. So when we execute that, now our multiplication table looks okay. And it did find a low value of 1. And that's what I'm going to really talk you through, is how to do that. So when you have to write functions in that 2D array assignment, what we're going to do is the following. You first have to have a prototype. So your prototype line, as an example here, to find the lowest is we want to return an integer value. The name of the function is find lowest, and we're using a 2-dimensional array. Now, with C++, we have to hard code the dimensions of anything besides that first column. So you have to put a constant of 5 here, and then int and int. This is the only time that we will allow you to use what's called a magic number in your programs. You also then need, when you create the method, so if we take a look at my main, I have a variable called low value, and I'm going to assign it find lowest, and I'm going to send it multiplication table, so it's sending the array, and I'm going to send the constants for the number of rows and the number of columns. It will return a value, and then I'm outputting the low value, and that's what you see on the screen down here. But how we write this function is different than what we've written before. When you go to write the function, it's going to look like this. You'll have your return type int, the name of the method, an integer array, and I named my local array table, but then you have to do bracket, bracket for the 2D array, and you must pass it the dimensions of any element past that first one. So if you had a 3-dimensional array, you'd have to hard code in the 5 or whatever value you're sending here. So that's a downfall with 2-dimensional arrays, and we don't actually use them a whole lot, but you do need to be exposed to them. And then I'm passing the constant for row into row size and the constant for columns into column size. The algorithm for finding a lowest. Okay, so this is finding a lowest in a 2D array, but it's actually the same algorithm that you have for a 1D array. The idea is that you first set the very first value in the array to lowest, whether it's lowest or not. It's just you assume the very first value is the lowest. And then you process through the rest of the array and you look for a lower value. So you process the array and you look for and reassign any lower values. So as I go through the array with a row by column setup, I'm going to check to see if table row column is smaller than the lowest that I already set. And then I reassign it if it is. So if I find a smaller value, I reset lowest is what's happening right here. We reset the lowest if needed. And then when we're all done, all said and done, the lowest should be the lowest of all elements in the array, and then I return the lowest, and that's what gets sent back to main right here. And so the low value is 1. Now, we knew the low value was going to be 1 because of the fact that this is a multiplication table, but this was a good way for me to model for you how you're going to write your methods for the 2D array assignment. So if we go back and we take a look at your assignment, you will write a method for finding the lowest and the greatest or the highest. You will also write a method for average. You can follow some of your code on the previous program for finding an average. The difference on finding the average is you will have to process a 2D array, but basically you're going to just accumulate like you did before. Your sum will equal sum plus the current value here. You also might be able to use a range-based loop to do some of this processing. That is your helper video for the 2D array assignment. Good luck on it. Please send me questions and or any clarification questions that you have. Don't forget also, I do expect to see the execution of your code pasted below. So if I highlight this code here and I right-click copy is how it works on this GDB compiler. Delete out all of their extra copyright stuff, and then I have to comment this or put it in a comment block. That will tell me what your output was.